Morning folks, I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters in the Pathfinder School, and what I thought I'd do today out here at the forge in the shop is I would try to recreate a pair of hand-forged scissors. And recreating items from the past and being able to become more self-reliant in the things that we create and we can create, I think is important. But I like to recreate historical items as well. And scissors are something that have been used since Egyptian times. Most of them were the spring style scissors like you see for shearing sheep and things like that today on smaller scale. The scissors like these that are hand forged overseas, or at least they're made overseas, that are pivoting type scissors like this, really didn't come into being until Egyptian times. And they really didn't come into production or full replication or manufacturing until the 1760s in England, and then later in the 1830s in Scandinavia. But scissors that were like this style with the pivoting center in them, cross-cutting like this, were used even in the Viking era, and there are examples of scissors like this that have been found in Viking burials. So this type of scissor has been around for a long, long time. And today we're going to try to recreate that. So I'm going to use two pieces of metal stock that are 1095, that are 1 inch wide and 1 foot long. And I'm going to make each side individually and match them up, and then I'm going to try to put them together and make a pair of scissors. So stay with me and I'll walk you through the process. Okay, so I've basically taken one side of these shears and matched it up and cut it out of a piece of 1095. And now I'm going to just kind of clean this up so it's the exact profile that I want. And then I'm going to make the other side out of another piece of 1095, and then we'll start the assembly and forging process. There's not a lot of forging involved in this other than heating things up to bend them and round them out, and then of course the heat treating, tempering and quenching and tempering of the blades themselves. As you can see, they're a single bevel edge, and they weren't overly sharp necessarily like a knife blade, but they had a fairly steep, probably a 30-degree angle single bevel on them, and we'll put that on there probably on the belt grinder itself, on a 2-inch belt grinder, but that could easily be put in there with an angle grinder as well if you're trying to do this with simple tools. And you could heat this stuff up if you had to with an oxyacetylene torch or something like that if you didn't have a forge. So really the first thing I want to do is just clean up some of the jagged edges, and I'm just going to lay this thing right here on the belt to do that. And just kind of get that thing trued up to the line. So that when I trace this onto my second piece, I'll have an exact match in the end. So the only thing I'm going to do now is just lay this one on top of another piece exactly like it, trace it on there with a marker, and then I'm going to cut that piece out. And if I turn it over, it'll be the opposite way. So it doesn't matter that I cut it the same, because I can always flip it over and it'll be the opposite side. Okay, so there's our second side layout. We'll just go over on the bandsaw and chop that dude out, and we'll come over here, get it straightened up and matching on this one, and then we'll get to work. Now once we get that cut out, if we take our scrap from both sides, we've actually got two pretty decent knife blades right there that we can use later on out of 1095. So we'll set that scrap aside, save that for carving knives or smaller puku style knives down the road here. Okay, so once we get our two sides cut out, what we're looking at is this. We want those blades to overlap at the tip. And don't worry about any of this down here, because we're going to shape that the way we want it here momentarily. Right now what we're looking at is initial fit up. Where do we want to put our hole? Because we've got to drill this thing as well, and we'll drill it before we grind the blades in or do anything else. While the metal's still annealed and soft, we'll go ahead and drill our hole in here. So we need to figure out where that's going to be and get that in the right spot. I'm going to take a metal punch here to basically punch myself a spot on there where I'm going to drill that. Okay, so once we decide how we want this blade to lay against each other, then we can kind of come in here and figure out a good center point to punch this. And we'll just come in here and mark a spot. We'll drill one side and then we'll match it up to the other side and mark it and drill it on the drill press or with a regular hand drill. Either one will work. Okay, so now we're going to find our rivet stock, and we can use just a regular nail for that if we want to, or we can use a piece of steel round stock. And I kind of go between the two. I like to use nails for pins and knife scales, but I think we're going to want a little bit more beef to this rivet. So I think I'm going to go with a piece of round stock that's bigger diameter than the nail itself, because I've got some scrap laying around here. So now I just need to match that up to a drill bit. This is 7/32. Not quite there. This must be a piece of 1/4 inch round stock. I'd say it is. So we'll go ahead and cut a 1/4 inch hole in here and drill it through, and then we'll match it up and drill the other side. Okay, so we've got one side drilled, and now we're just going to lay it on top again and line things up the way we want them to lay when the scissors are done. Make sure we got an even amount of space there. And then we're just going to take a marking pen here. Double check everything. Give ourselves a circle there where we want our hole. We'll come in and punch that with our punch again. Just center punch it so that we can drill that hole. Okay, once we've got that taken care of, you can lay those over the top and just make sure it's exactly what we want it to be. Now we need to decide where we're going to put our plunge line on the blades themselves. So I'm going to lay this sideways here for a minute, and I'm going to put one on top of the other as they would lay. And by my plunge line, I mean where am I going to put my grind? I think I'm going to start about right here with my grind. I'm going to mark that on both sides just like that. And then I'm just going to start my grind here and go down, and here and go down by putting it on the same type of jigs that I use for the knives. But I'll use the one that I use for the draw knives because it's got about a 30-degree angle on it. All right, this is the jig that we use for our draw knives. And it puts about a 30-degree angle on there. So I've got the side that I've got the plunge line drawn on, and I'm going to move out a little bit away from that, but I've got to keep it flat against the jig. And I'm just going to use cheap clamp here, but I've got to make sure that when I clamp that on there, it's not going to move. And my plunge line is going to be on the straight side here. And I just want to make sure that I can line everything up and see what I'm doing. If I need to, I'll transfer that plunge line to the top of the knife, just like this, so that I can look at it from above on the sanding belt. Okay? And then we're just going to grind a single bevel grind on that side, similar to the draw knives. Okay, so there's one side done. Pretty much you've just got a single bladed or single bevel grind knife there at about a 30-degree angle, and I've ground that down pretty close. I've got about half the thickness of a dime maybe left there. Alright, so we're measuring our tails here to make sure that they're exactly the same length for both sides. And we've got them rounded out now. And now we're going to start to put the curvature in our handles, understanding that the blades will lay like this. I'm going to curve the handle toward the blade edge.